Charles is Clark Kent. He's Superman. When the chips are down, he's the guy that steps up and he's Superman. He always achieves beyond what you expected him to do.
We've been talking about Jackson ever since the fire went out. I'm going to Jackson.
1946, Jackson, Mississippi. Gas costs 15 cents a gallon. And 1946 had its share of notable births. Bill Clinton, George Bush, Dolly Parton, and Charles Lewis Overby.
There was just a magnetism about Charles always. Everybody liked him.
As a young boy, he delivered the Clarion Ledger newspaper. A major influence early on, his mother, Margaret.
My mother drilled into us that we could not act poor or even think poor. She worked her fingers to the bone to make sure my brother and I acted properly.
Charles is the most unassuming guy. He's kind of over in the shadows, and the rest of us are out there blustering around, and the next thing you know, Charles is driving the train.
Train, coming around, baby.
The Charles Overby train took off running full steam in high school. While working for the school paper, he told a friend, "If they actually pay you to do this, then this is what I want to do." His personal ethics were the right tools for the job.
He is Charles Overby, and what you see is what you get. And he's a man of great character, great integrity.
After attending the University of Mississippi, he married Andrea Godwin.
Andrea is Charles Rock, and she is, again, just like him, so balanced.
With skill and determination, Charles's newspaper career took off.
That Southern charm, which is Tennessee, Mississippi charm, coupled with a steel-trap mind and high intelligence and strong communication skills. He sort of floats like a butterfly through adversity and his real interest in other people.
In the 1970s, the Nashville Banner was purchased by Gannett, and Charles later moved on to another of his interests, politics.
That you were once chairman of the Tennessee Republican Party. I was the new governor, you came from newspapering, and we needed a chairman of the party, so I asked you to do it. It didn't work out so well. First thing you did, if you'll remember, was you held a press conference and called the Democratic Speaker of the House Boss Hogg, and right at the time I was trying to negotiate an education deal with him.
By the early 1980s, Gannett Company CEO Al Newharth had lured Charles back to journalism after his successful career in politics. In all, Charles worked 16 years as reporter, editor, and corporate executive for Gannett, including positions as editor of Florida Today and a management role with USA Today.
We felt that we were very fortunate that we were able to convince him to go back into journalism after he'd had his few years in politics. And he came back as the editor in Jackson, Mississippi.
In 1982, Charles became editor of the newspaper he delivered as a child, the Jackson, Mississippi Clarion Ledger. In addition to his impressive journalistic skills, he brought great courage.
The courage was first evident when he came into Mississippi and took on these icons in the legislature to support William Winter's legislative package for educational reform. Nobody anywhere in the state had done that. You don't take on your neighbors in Mississippi.
With Mississippi last in the nation in many areas of education, the Clarion Ledger pushed hard for reform.
Report on House Bill 4 is adopted.
In 1983, after the legislature passed sweeping changes, the Clarion Ledger was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for public service.
When I think back on that and all that we tried to do for the best reasons, and it happened, it makes me really happy.
Well, it's not everyone who wins the Pulitzer Prize. One has to start with that realization that he is in the Hall of Fame when it comes to journalism.
In 1989, Charles became president of the Gannett Foundation, which later became the Freedom Forum. In 1997, the world's first interactive museum for news, the Freedom Forum's museum, opened in Roslyn, Virginia. As the 21st century began, Charles led the charge for a second museum, this time bigger and bolder in Washington, D.C.
I recall one day getting a phone call from Charles while he was walking down Pennsylvania Avenue, and he said on the phone, "I think I found the site." I said, "Well, what's there?" And he said, "A big office building." And I said, "Well, how will you ever attract and find a way to buy a building on Pennsylvania Avenue?"
Charles indeed found a way. His plan? Offer $75 million for the land and $25 million for low-income housing.
Charles made his presentation, and the room was just hushed. And people were sort of shocked. The secretary for that meeting was Howard Baker, the former U.S. Senator. Howard Baker says, "Well, you've got courage." And the place broke up then.
And it came to be.
Hi, it's Selena. I'm calling to see if our account, if we've received the funds.
For what?
For the Freedom Forum?
The 100 million?
Yes.
Yes, that came in.
Today, we start doing what news people are good at. We start digging up dirt.
In 2008, Charles's bold idea became a reality.
This is awesome. This is so great.
Charles Overby has been primarily responsible for the new museum. And it was his vision and his imagination, his acumen in both politics and building and news that developed that.
Charles made sure one of the driving forces in the museum continues to be the one that contains 45 words.
Charles is a model for all of us who know him. His passion for the First Amendment, I mean, he really believes in it, and he understands it practically and philosophically.
Charles is a strong advocate of free press, free speech, and efforts to provide the public with a better understanding of the news media. He helped create the First Amendment Center at Nashville's Vanderbilt University. He also championed diversity in the newsroom through the Diversity Institute. For his decades of service, the board endowed the Overby Center for Southern Journalism and Politics at Ole Miss. Charles is dedicated not only to his values and beliefs, but to those who work with him.
There is not a day where Charles does not stop by and tell you how much he values your work and your dedication.
This is a great place, and it's mainly because of Charles and the values he instills in us and wanting to come in every day. And we do it because we love our job, but I think we do it because we know that this is what he wants us to do.
We interrupt this presentation to bring you breaking news about Charles Overby.
Well, I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you his nickname, but, you know, some of us know him as Peanut.
For years, I'm not sure I even knew he had another name. And then as he moved up in the ranks with Gannett, he became Charles. But those of us that knew him those many years ago, 40 years ago, he was and he will always be Peanut Overby.
Family, friends, and coworkers know Charles for what he stands for and for his sense of humor.
We were in New Orleans. I rented out the House of Blues. And that evening we hired these two gentlemen to portray the Blues Brothers. And they put a black hat on Charles with dark glasses, and they made Charles dance. They had him singing, and as he was dancing around the floor, he got to me and said, "You're fired." And it was the buzz of the convention for the next few days. And because he was applauded, I'm still here today, so I didn't get fired.
He's what I would call a foxhole buddy friend, one that you can always count on.
Charlie's a great family man, and he's a great husband, he's a great father, and he's very proud of his family.
Charles's impact on 555 Pennsylvania Avenue will last far into the future.
Charles Overby's fingerprints are on every single corner and piece of material in this building. The extraordinary information that one can acquire, the dream, the ambition, the inspiration of Charles Overby.
I just get up every morning feeling good about what is going to happen and what I'm going to be able to do. I've always been blessed with that, even when I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning to throw papers.
I have been able to do so many things, so many opportunities because of Charles Overby. And I want to say thank you.
He's a dreamer, but more importantly than that, he's also a doer.
And that's Charles Overby. He would have made a sensational president of the United States of America.